Our guest speaker for today, Kristina Höök. I'm sure I haven't pronounced it correctly, but he will give you the double amount and how to pronounce that.
It's not an umlaut, it's a specific letter.
It's a specific letter. I read it because I only read German, you see. Kia is a professor of interaction design at KTH in Sweden, Stockholm, and has also been managing the Mobile Life, which is a very successful HCI centre in Stockholm, and has very much put HCI on the map. Kia's done lots of fascinating research over the years, but one thing that sticks in my mind was when she was here, not here but in Cambridge 3 years ago. She was looking into how you could take from the experience of riding a horse and form a theory in HCI, which I thought was good. Very courageous and a wonderful thing to do, and you didn't fall off the horse, did you? Anyway, with that,
well, a few times I did.
He's going to talk about design for Somaesthetics. I can't say the words, but
one of those. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, I think maybe I have one of the few papers on horseback riding in the human-computer interaction field. So that you can look at. And it's actually to do with what I'm going to talk about today, about the soma, the body, and aesthetics, because riding is an aesthetical experience. The rhythm of the horse is super, super interesting. Likewise as dancing is, and so on. So that is what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to do is I really want to talk about our latest project, and we haven't published that yet or anything, but it's just so cool, and I want to talk about it, and I want to hear your opinions and feedback and so on. But in order to talk about that last project, I first give you a little bit of a journey through some of the stuff that we've been doing to sort of explain why we came to Somaesthetics as a theory and the kind of design that we've been doing. So the questions are to do with how we can do a better job in interaction design with bodily interaction, and in particular somebody called Schusterman and his theories about Somaesthetics. So, as Yvonne said, I am heading a center called Mobile Life, and this is our creed, to always explore and always create and always enjoy. So this is both what we do at work, but also the kind of designs that we do are there to be explorative, creative, that our end users should be allowed to be creative and playful and enjoy and so on. That doesn't mean that we avoid pain, because pain can also be enjoyable. So horseback riding is not always only pleasurable. Sometimes it's painful and you fall off, and you still enjoy doing it. So by enjoyment we take a very broad perspective, but we don't do work. We don't do work. We think work is overrated in general. And we should be doing more serious studies of the unserious in life. So that's what we do. And it's a pretty big center if you count all the people and the industrial partners that we collaborate with. It's about 80 people or so. In the center, the people that are actually sitting there working are about 40 or so. So the partners we have are, for example, Microsoft Research in Cambridge, that I know you're also collaborating with here. But we also have some cool partners, some unexpected partners, like IKEA, we think are super, super cool to work with. But also ABB, which is a very boring company, sorry. And so why are they interested in playfulness? Well, they actually thought it was interesting because they have an issue with people not wanting to work in boring environments, and therefore they needed to bring some playfulness into the work environment. But what I'm going to talk about is not the whole center and all the different things we do. I actually left a couple of books and some information about the whole center if you want to know more. I'm just going to talk about this one strand of work to do with bodily interaction. And why is that interesting? Well, because we're getting a lot of technology that is very, very close to your body, or even on the inside of your body. And I've been upset with that technology, in that I think it's a lot of the time extremely reductionistic. So it sort of tries to reduce who you are into a number that we can measure, and then it sort of says to you, this is the whole story of you and your experiences of the world. You're happy 0.8, or you are moving this much, or you should be moving that much, and so on. And I think that annoying and terrible, and we shouldn't let industry industrialize our bodies. But so how do you design in other ways then? If you want to create for something else, how do you do that? So one of the things we've done, for example, is I sent one of my PhD students to, we were hoping that it would be a culture with no technology whatsoever, the last country on earth to get mobiles. It's a country called Vanuatu, it's in the South Pacific, a bunch of islands in the South Pacific. The problem was that on the very day he arrived in one of those islands that was supposedly not having any technology whatsoever, they got mobiles on that day. So instead of studying pristine culture without mobile technology, you got to study the changes. And that was also super interesting. And he's got many interesting results from that. But one of the results that I thought was super interesting is how getting a mobile not only changes the way you communicate and the way you do your business and all of those important things, or the way you play and so on, but also, in fact, your bodily behaviors. And I think we all know this, and it's already happened to us, but we sort of forgotten about it. So in this particular country, they are living on islands and they're on canoes quite a lot, and they don't have clothes where they can put the mobile in a pocket, so instead they have it dangling around their neck and in one of those strings. And so when they're canoeing and they're picking something up out of the water, the mobile goes into the water and boom, it's gone, right? Or they're climbing trees, they're picking stuff from the trees and so on, and the mobile hits this trunk and boom, it's gone, you know. So they learned how to behave and how to move in different ways. Way more stiff upper body behaviors when canoeing, or even taking hits on their body in order to protect the mobile. So Pedro saw one of these guys falling over. He fell on a cliff with his chest really hard and got bruised. And he was like so happy because he was like, oh, I saved my mobile! Because of course in this culture they're pretty poor, and so the mobile is a very precious thing. And so I think for us, we know a lot of this already. I'm sure you all know where you have your mobiles right now, right? So you're always orienting around your mobiles. And if there was water here somewhere, like a big glass of water, you would be very wary about the fact that there's water and mobile in the same space, and you would be caring about that. So we do a lot of caring, a lot of taking care of. And to us, it was just interesting to see this. So it is changing us in an extremely sort of physical, concrete way. And we've also done studies even of how it changes animals and animal behavior. So I don't know if hunting is big in Britain. Maybe it's only for the upper classes doing fox hunting, or I don't know. But in Sweden, it's something that everybody does. A lot of people go hunting in Sweden. And so one of the things you do when you have a dog, when you go hunting, is that you have a dog with you. Is anybody a hunter? You know what the dog is for? Sort of. The dog is there to find the prey, and once they find it, they're supposed to stand still and mark the place so that the hunter can come and shoot the animal, right? And so what they do now in Sweden is they put GPS on their dogs. Sometimes they even put a mobile on their dogs. And so that way they can follow, where's my dog now? And when it stops, they know, okay, that's where the bear or the elk or whatever it is they're shooting is. And so in one of our studies, one of these hunters told us that he'd been hunting with his dog for 10 years. The 2 last years he'd been using a GPS to track the dog. And he said that in that time he learned so much more about the dog than he'd done in the previous 8 years. Now he realized why the dog was doing things that he previously did not understand. The technology had changed their relationship and brought about new ways of interacting. So, our body movements and the body movements of the animals we have around us and so on are changed by this technology in sort of super interesting and profound ways. And when it comes to human or computer-animal interaction, even Oscar has decided to start a conference on that. So there's a whole conference now on computer-animal interaction that you can go to if you're interested. So what does this mean? Why am I so worried about it? So I was reading a long time ago, somebody called Longo, sort of being very, very critical of this, saying that electronics, robotics, and spintronics invade and transform the body. And as a consequence of this, the body becomes an object and it loses its remaining personal characteristics, those characteristics that might make us consider it the sacred guardian of our identity. So that was pretty heavy, but also very interesting. It's very interesting that when we get this technology coming closer to our whole body, rather than only interfering with our fingers and our eyes and our brains, then suddenly it becomes a different deal and we have to think about it in different ways. Perhaps. I don't know. So to me this is kind of interesting as a challenge to us. What do we do to design in a good way? So I was looking for theories, and if you look back over the last, whatever, 3,000 years of philosophy, you will find that most of the time, whenever the body is mentioned, it's either in that dualistic sense, you know, like Descartes was talking about the brain and mind is one thing and the body is another. Or if it's talked about, it's also usually the male body, the norm, the normal body, with things sticking out and so on. So there's very little in the Western philosophy about the actual physical, corporal, pulsating body that we interact with. While in the Eastern philosophy, that division has not been so strong. The body's part of your way of being in the world and your philosophy and so on. And so somebody who picked up on this is Richard Schusterman, and this is him in a golden suit in an art project where he's trying to, as a branch of phenomenology, trying to talk about the body as part of our ways of being in the world, and how philosophy that is very much about cultivating your mind should also be about cultivating your whole self, also body, whether that is separable or not, I don't think, but still, you know, incorporating your whole body into that endeavor. So some people find this very disturbing, because basically what he's saying is that there are better ways of being in the world. If you use your body, exercise, do interesting stuff like yoga or Feldenkrais exercises or whatever, you can extend on your repertoire of movements and of possible experiences. You can improve your somatic awareness and your somatic mastery. And so this is what he's talking about. So on the one hand, this rubs a lot of people in the wrong way. On the other hand, it's true, isn't it? By doing stuff like horseback riding, I had more experiences and more interesting experiences of the world than if I didn't, right? By doing whatever, sword fighting or some other sports, it is interesting. Those bodily movements are interesting to us. We are that kind of animal that enjoy movement, of course. So his thesis is that Somaesthetics' theory aims to improve the meaning and understanding, efficiency and beauty of our movements, and of the environments to which our actions contribute and from which they also derive their energies and significance. Another philosopher that I found super interesting is Johnston, Maxine Sheets Johnston. She started out as a dancer and a choreographer, and then she decided to go into biology, evolutionary biology, and she just talks a lot about how movement, bodily movement, is the basis of how we are in the world. Language is secondary. Movement comes first. Without movement, no life, no language, no interaction. And so she also talks a lot about the other thing that I found inspirational, and that is the strong connection between movement and emotion. And again, I think you all know that certain movements will make you perhaps more inclined to have certain experiences. So I know you're British, but can we move together a little bit? Do you want to stand up?
Too hot.
It's too hot. It is a bit hot. Stand up. So we start by moving upwards with loads of movements, lots of expressive techniques, like wow! And that is lovely, isn't it? Yay! And then we try doing way more tense movements. So tense your muscles, tense your belly, tense your chest, everything. Tense your face, everything. And then try laughing. Okay, let's do it again. Embarrassing part of the lecture is over, almost. So, my point was just to say, inward moving, tensed movements spur certain kinds, or are more likely to engage you in certain kinds of experiences, while upwards, outwards rising movements are more likely to engage you in other experiences. Of course, you need to be willing to engage with it, otherwise it fails. Anyway, so her claim is pretty strong, where she says, you know, without the readiness to act in a certain way, without certain corporal tonicities, a certain feeling would not, and indeed could not be felt. And a certain action would not, and indeed could not be taken, since the postural dynamic of the body are what make the feeling and action possible. Pretty strong statement. So it seems to me like, you know, here's something super interesting that we could use in our design processes, right? If we make our users engage in certain movements, not only the small ones, but the big ones, with our whole bodies, or even turning inwards, feeling, listening to your own breathing, and so on, then we open up for a whole repertoire of other possible experiences. So our whole field is turning towards user experiences, so this is part of that. It is really hot, isn't it? So but how do you design for that? How do you tap into this readiness to act with technology without disturbing what is wonderfully there for you already, namely your body? So the first attempts I did, and this is where I started out a long time ago, was to work with something we call affective loops. So basically biofeedback loops, but where we try to say, okay, if you're interacting with a system and you force the user to take certain positions, and then you have a narrative in the interaction that makes sense towards that kind of movement, then you can pull people into stronger and stronger positive things, or negative things, or scary things, or whatever, you know. So if they want to, of course, you can always go into an interaction like that and refuse to participate. But if you want to be engaged, you can be engaged. So an affective loop experience to me is like you see emotion as a process that is constructed in the interaction. It's not a state to be detected. It's something that is constructed in the interaction and changed over and over. And by making the system respond in certain ways, you can pull the user into this sort of interaction. And in particular, using bodily movement as a way of enticing users. And then, for me, it's super important that we do this with an active meaning-making individual to choosing whether they want to engage and how to engage with that interaction. So it's not, well, we can do some persuasion, but that's not what I'm interested in at all. So let me give you just two examples before I go to my favorite example. So the first one we call the Lega. This one we did in 2010. And the idea here is that you are in a museum, in an art exhibition. You have this thingy here that we call the Lega, and by that you can do movements, and you can create tactile traces of your movements. So you can shake it, you can tickle it, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. And then you push a button on top of it, and that leaves a trace at that location where you did that movement. And so then when your friend comes by, you feel what you did at that location in terms of vibrations that are mirroring what I was doing when I was there. So we exhibited this an art exhibition in Stockholm. We only produced 5 of these because we're poor researchers, so we couldn't do more than 5. So there could be up to 5 friends walking around in the museum, leaving traces for one another to interact with, and building upon one another's traces. So I'm going to show you what it looks like, so we'll just skip the...
Om man är själv så där till exempel.
Further.
Okej, jag kanske om man ligger på
So they're speaking in Swedish, sorry about that. What she's talking about here is how this allows for an interactivity. It's not only a museum guide that you get information from, but you can walk around the museum and express yourself and try to figure out what you're feeling and what your friends are feeling and so on.
Why did you choose friends and not strangers?
What? What is this?
Why did you choose friends and not strangers?
So, expressing yourself physically, bodily, emotionally, and detecting and understanding somebody else's expression is a difficult process, right? Like right now, am I happy? You know, am I pretending or is it for real? If you were my friend, you know it's not for real. I'm putting it on, right? So I think that a language like this, which is super abstract and it's physical, but it's not saying particular things, you know, it's just there to be experienced. I think it's way more interesting to have between friends. That's what we think. Okay, so then anyway, just to, I think you get the point of the system, right? So at KAI this year, we have a 2KAI paper that talks about whether this works or not. So what do you think? Do you think it works?
It's very hard to tell since it's unclear what it's supposed to
What
be
is
doing.
the trace?
So the trace, what you do is, let's turn off this. So what you do with this is, it's an accelerometer inside, so you can do movements. There's also pressure sensors that you can touch in different patterns. You can scratch it, or you can do, you know, or different things. That is recorded, and as you push the button on top, it leaves that trace so that the next person who comes will feel the same pattern as the one you created. So if you did this, I will feel vibrations going in exactly that pattern.
So is the idea that you it enhances your walking around the museum, or that you connect with that person?
So the idea we had was for allowing for communication between people on a very physical bodily level, to leave it asynchronous or synchronous as you're walking around the museum. Okay, so did it fail or not? It failed, miserably, because people got so interested in their own expression. So they felt like, oh, this is this thing that I enjoy touching, I enjoy exploring my own experience, and they got all absorbed by their own experience rather than communicating with others through this. Of course it happened, but so why is that? So this, if you come and listen to our 2KAI paper at KAI, we go through the phenomenological explanations to this. So one of the things is that you don't actually always know what you're feeling. So if I were to ask you right now, what are you feeling right now? Can you tell me exactly what you're feeling? No. Okay, you have to think about it, right? You have to turn a bit inwards. So emotion is not something that is easily detected in yourself or in others. So if you ask somebody to express themselves physically, it takes a bit of probing. And if you're going through an art exhibition, it's like, wow, what do I think about this art? Do I think anything? Am I excited by it? What do I want to say about this? And that becomes an all-absorbing, super interesting experience.
Was that because they were an art gallery, or if you just in with this layer thing anyway, they were just absorbed in the novelty of it? Experience.
The novelty effect.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know. But I don't think that is a novelty effect, because that is what kept happening with us as well as we were using it and testing it on ourselves. And we kept changing it and developing it. And I think we are just super interested in ourselves, right? We find our own reactions super, super interesting. And when we're in a dialogue, determining what to say, how to portray and so on, takes quite a lot of thinking and processing.
But don't you think it's at least partly because it's not obvious how to communicate through this? So, I might not be completely self-absorbed, but I just don't know how to communicate to someone else. Like, what does it mean if I scratch it? What do I think it's going to mean to me?
Yeah. This is not what they reported on, and this is not what they said, and this is not what I felt when interacting with it. Or it was just a very interesting experience to go into. There was, of course, communication. Of course, the people were sometimes actually really leaving traces for one another, and they did understand one another, which was super interesting, somebody left a trace in front of a painting of an IKEA sofa, and her friend came along and said, yeah, I know exactly why she left this trace here, because this is the exact same IKEA sofa she had 30 years ago, and blah, 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 and that's why she's like so exhilarated about this. So, I don't know. And what we've done is looked at others who've been trying to design for emotional bodily communication between people, and most of them fail. And I'm not saying that it's not possible to do, but it's a super, super interesting and very difficult design problem. So this one was a successful system in certain ways, but in other ways not. Yeah, but that was just one example, and we're still on the way towards the interesting example, okay? The second example I'm going to give them is this one where we do focus on your personal experience of yourself. So here, I was again worried about all of those technologies that you strap onto your body, because the previous system, the Lega, you are moving, you are shaking, you are doing your expression, right? You're constructing your expression. But what about all of those technologies that try to tell you the truth about your body through putting sensors on your body, right? So all the medical equipment or sports equipment that we are suddenly surrounded. So we created a system we called affective health. So it is picking up on sensor data. In this case, it's a lie detector, a galvanic skin response sensor that picks up on your sweat level. Right now, there would be a lot of sweating. It also picks up on pulse and movement and so on, and then it transmits the data in real time to your mobile. So on your mobile, you can do two different things. On the one hand, you can look at this little piece here is what is happening right now. So you can enter into a biofeedback loop where you go like, what is happening in my body right now? If I think about my ex-husband, or if I think about something nice, my yoga class last week, what happens then? And so this color here goes all the way from bright red color all the way down to blue. It's not interpreting whether that is good or bad. It's just saying your arousal level is either up or down. And the reason that it's not trying to interpret for you is because we can't. And then this data is traveling into this shell-shaped thingy. So you can also, after a while, see, you can zoom out to different levels. You can see a minute, an hour, 24 hours a week, whatever. And then you start seeing patterns in your own life. So you start perhaps seeing that every morning there seems to be a lot of activity because it's always red and orange and then you come to work and buff goes down to blue. That's interesting. What does it mean? Does it mean that I'm stressed at home in the morning? I should get up half an hour earlier in the morning? Or does it mean that I'm depressed whenever I come to work because my arousal goes way too low? Or, so we don't know, but the end user usually knows. So that is how people use that system.
So I know you're not doing you're not classifying this pattern, but the fact that you are showing only, for example, GSR, so you're focusing on the rounds that, and it's just a small window on how you feel.
Yes.
And by providing those color and only that view of that, somehow you are putting the person in, you are classifying the person because it's saying only one side of there and say, oh my God, this is my arousal, and you may have also negative view of that and say, here, low arousal. So you are doing a classification because you're taking only, in a different way, because you are taking only a portion of it, and you are giving this to them and bringing them to reflect, possibly in a wrong way, because this is what
definitely. And on top of that, the data is not always reliable even. But the point here is that we're not trying to give an interpretation, we're only giving a color scale. So we're not saying that red, for example, is bad for you. We're saying that at this moment you were sweating more than you were at the previous moment. But the whole point was to try and pinpoint that and say, is there a way we can use a sensor that is reductionistic in itself and still allow for an evocative interface that allows for me to create my own stories about my life. And in our studies, this is what we find. People do make all sorts of super interesting stories about their own life. In a system prior to this, we had, for example, one user she was all into crystals and healing, and she said, oh, I'm lilac here. Lilac, that's the color of spirituality. It must mean that I'm spiritual at this point. And we were like, oh shit, you know. All we do is measure your arousal level. We don't know whether you're spiritual from that. And then I realized that that's not up to me to say. If she wanted to interpret that way, that's her. So what you see here is somebody interpreting this, going through, this is what I feel, this is what I think was going on in my life. And people really enjoyed and found this evocative and interesting enough to find the stuff they needed in order to even change. Behavior change is one of those golden nuggets for anybody working in the health business or sports business or whatever. And here it actually happened. People changed. They used the system for a month, and even a year after, they spoke about how they changed their behavior as a response to try and figure this out.
So I think it was kind of interesting that you changed your behavior as a response to trying to figure it out. If you give them
a horoscope.
Well, to a
yes.
degree, yeah, if you just made mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Would it have had speculation, but think about the same effect?
Almost, I would say. Not entirely. Because of course people are trying to figure out the system. So they are doing things like exercising like crazy to see, does it respond to that? They are doing things like sitting and looking at it and thinking about their ex-husband and going like, oh yeah, shit, it is responding to what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling and how I'm moving and so on. This little white thing here is how much you're moving, and the color is your GSR. So yes, there needs to be some truth, but it needs to be open for interpretation. It needs to give that kind of leeway, because life is complex. So this is what we're trying to do here. Coming back to your question, yes, we are using only a few sensors, and yes, that is not the truth about you. But by doing the interface in this way, you leave space open for interpretation.
But you're also biasing somehow.
Yes, it's sort of connecting back to bodily and social processes of your life, and we're not portraying just anything, you know. But still, this is not perfect either, right? I love this system, it's lovely, but what is it doing? It's pushing back responsibility onto you to deal with your own life and your own, you know, reactions to stuff. And so what our users say is, this is lovely, but I'd like to talk to a therapist now because I can see that this and this is going on in my life, and I need some instruments, I need some kind of tools to change. And I don't know how to change. Some of them knew how to change, and some of them felt like they wanted to talk at least to some peer about this. And they want to actively engage in something that can change them, their own responses to life and what they do in their everyday life. And so even though this is super interesting, this affective loop thing, is super interesting, and you can build all sorts of stuff. Like we built games, we built social communication, we built this inwards looking stuff and so on. Super, super interesting. It was still like, I need something more. I need something where we make users actively engage with improving their somatic awareness and mastery. Okay? So now finally to my favorite project right now that I haven't published. Just a little bit more from Richard Schusterman on what he means. So first of all, he says that somatic consciousness is of course always shaped by culture, and different forms will arise in different cultures, obviously. Yeah, you don't have issues with that, right? And Somaesthetics is interested not merely in describing our culturally shaped forms of somatic consciousness and modes of somatic practice, but also in improving. Okay, so this is the one where people go like, whoa. Is he going to tell me what is good for me and my body and how to move? But yeah, he is. Third, to effect such improvements, it also includes practical exercises of somatic training rather than mere philosophical discourse. So to engage with this, it's not enough to read his book. You also have to do some of the physical exercises that he talks about in order to understand it. There's no other way of understanding this.
Sorry, could you just clarify what you think he means by the first paragraph? Because I don't have a problem with it, because I have no idea what it means.
Yeah, so female-male stuff. Like, let's have a look at the females in the room and how they sit, and the guys and how you sit, and your behaviors. You know, female behaviors a lot of times is this, right? Protecting your parts. Male behaviors is way more male domination and so on and so on.
That's not cultural.
Why is that?
Physical.
It's not. That's
People have more flexible hips, and I would suggest that men have considerably more tender parts.
Is this also because my body is flexible in this way?
Also, I've got my legs crossed.
No, surely you know a lot of female ways of walking and talking is culturally...
But that doesn't mean that it's always shaped by culture. So, I mean,
I think it is.
I mean, it's quite a strong statement to say that it's always shaped by culture.
Yeah.
There's a degree to which there are certain things about somatic consciousness which presumably are universals or are inherent in the way they're aware. I mean, it's the same thing in the language type debates. Like, it's a very strong thing to say that it's always shaped by culture, which is, I suppose, rather than somatic consciousness is often shaped by culture. If you see what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
Well, this goes back to where you stand on nurture and culture. Nurture and nature, whatever. Yeah. Sorry.
I was just thinking that if you think about how babies start to move, like they would be very much pushed by the environment and all the stimuli, so they go and grasp things. So it's cultural because what is in the environment is cultural. Whoever we are imitating is cultural. So I think it might not be, unless you are like in an island without any stimuli, then you probably is also cultural.
Is it okay if I move on? Because this I think is a religious debate, okay?
Before we do that, can you just define somatic consciousness?
Yeah, so the only way I can do that is if we do some exercises. And I have one at the end. For those of you who are interested, can stay on and we'll do a simple, fun, playful exercise together, okay?
What was your question? What is somatic consciousness? You're talking about it, I don't know what it means.
It's about knowing about your own body. For example, right now, can you tell me about your feet? Can you tell me about whether your left foot is further away from your body than your right foot?
This is bizarre. To me, you've got to tell us something first. Why do you want to know about my feet? If you gave me a halfway intelligent question about any part of my body, within reason, I would do my best to respond, because then I have an understanding of how the body related to some potential view of meaning. In the absence of that relationship, obviously we can't answer these empty questions.
Maybe we should let Kia carry on with the talk. We can do questions afterwards.
Let's move and have a look at what we designed, and then I think you should stay for the exercise.
I'm staying anyway.
Yes.
I've got a lot of questions.
So this idea about designing for somatic awareness and even somatic mastery, improving and extending on your repertoire of possible ways of understanding yourself, your own movements and so on. What is that? Is that possible to design for? And in particular, we're going to look at a design where we're trying to turn inwards and feel our inner organs, our inner muscles, our inner tonus, our breathing, and so on. Maybe we'll do a quick exercise just because you're so skeptical. So let's just stop breathing for a second. Okay, now you can breathe again so that you don't faint. Where did you stop breathing? What muscle did you use? Tell me. Tell me. How did you push it out or in? Did you push it up or down?
Stop.
I would say inside, but it doesn't make sense.
So a simple exercise like stopping to breathe, and you can't even answer my question. You need to improve your somatic awareness, okay? So because you can stop breathing here, you can stop breathing here, you can stop breathing by pushing up your, what's the name of it? Or you can pull it down, you can pull out your belly, you can put in your belly, and so there are many different ways of stopping to breathe, right? By doing exercises that reminds you about all the repertoire you have, you can engage in more interesting ways of stopping to breathe. This was a stupid example because maybe you don't want to stop to breathe. But so to do this, design project, what we had to do is to take Schusterman seriously and actually engage in one of the bodily practices that he says is interesting and possible to work with. And so this is the Feldenkrais. So I don't know, has anybody done Feldenkrais? Super cool. Anybody done yoga? Some yoga people. Okay, so then you know this idea about breathing in and out with your movements and so on. Feldenkrais is like that, but not. It's different. It's more. It's less of stretching, less of that kind of stuff, and more inwards listening to your own body. So here we're doing Feldenkrais exercises. This is actually me and this guy, Richard Schusterman, doing breathing together in a sort of compassionate exercise, where he's listening to my breathing and I'm listening to his breathing, and we're trying to breathe together. We also worked a lot with the different materials we could be using in order to create something that would be engaging, somatically engaging and evocative in this way. So we tried vibration feedback, we tried anti-gravity yoga, we tried light feedback, we tried all sorts of stuff. And the prototypes we have right now that are sort of still being developed, together in fact with IKEA, are three different. I'm going to present three of them. There's a bunch of them, but anyway. One is the Sumo Carpet. So what happens here is that you listen to instructions talking about, for example, stopping to breathe or whatever. And depending on the instructions, this carpet will heat up in different parts underneath your body to help you focus on those parts of your body. In this room, it wouldn't make sense because it's so hot in here. Yes! But in Sweden, a lot of the time, heat is lovely.
If it's too loud, no one can hear us, let me know.
So this is the first prototype. The second one, well, the first prototype is interesting in that, for us at least, I don't know how much you're working with design that involves other modalities, but for us, working with heat was the first time we'd ever done that. So we were trying vibration, we were trying 3D sound, we were trying all sorts of stuff, but the only one that really worked, that didn't distract you from your inner experience of yourself, that actually helped you go deeper inside, was heat in our experience. And we found it super interesting to try and sort of map out what is the aesthetics of heat, what are the felt bodily experiences and the subjectivity of that. So one of our users says, and also one thing is the heat makes the feeling and the appearance of those areas change, that is, those areas that are heated. So the simple explanation is that they get smaller and larger. So if the heat goes on, I could easily compare that. So yeah, now the space feels larger than on the other side, vice versa. Okay, so this probably does not make a lot of sense to you. Or? So if you do these exercises, you will suddenly feel that parts of your body are larger than other parts, even though you know you're symmetrical, right? You still feel like I have a big problem with my hip, and so my left side, when I really turn inwards, my left side is always way bigger, and it's orange and red, while the other side is blue, dark blue, green, and much smaller. So when I get the heat feedback, that allows me to really probe that experience and understand it and go deeper into it. So this is what this person is trying to talk about. The second prototype that we built is like a lamp. So basically the idea is that you lay on the mat. You could, for example, be laying on that Somatic carpet, and then above you have this thing that is super nice and super interesting and sort of makes you go into your own space. Inside this you have a breathing sensor that follows the distance to your chest. And so the lamp inside is then dimming in and out with your breathing. And this is of course a bit tricky to do because you don't want the lamp to be one step behind your breathing, which is what the sensor would do. So we have to do a little bit of calculation here to really follow the rhythm of your breathing in an interesting way. And here, this one we use it in particular with those breathing exercises to help you go deeper into your own experience of your lungs and how big your lungs are and so on. The third one I don't like. I think this is a failure. but it's interesting because it's a failure. In this one, you lay on top of pressure sensors. So these are your shoulders, your hips, and your feet. And above you in the ceiling, we project something. Right now, here you see a body, but we've also been projecting other stuff. And as you're doing tiny, tiny movements, you can see like graphics that are created based on your super, super small movements. So why is it that I don't like this one? Because it doesn't help you go inwards, it helps you go outwards to create that kind of external representation of yourself that you start to control rather than actually getting deeper into yourself and your own physical body experience. So one of the huge, big problems, we have loads of problems in this project, but one of the big problems is, of course, how do you measure this? How do you know whether it's good or bad? As a designer and an academic, how can I do any user evaluation studies of stuff like this? So one of the things we've done, for example, is to try and allow people to create some kind of image, like kitchen poetry, fridge poetry, where you have your body and you put words on it, and then we generate poetry that explains, that sort of tries to describe what you were feeling before, and then you do the exercise, and then after. I was going to show you a video, but you already asked me so many questions, so I'll skip that one. Another way we've been studying this is we asked people to do clay figures. So you do a little clay thing, you do the exercise with the Somo Carpet, you come out, you do a new clay thingy. So here you see before and after. Obvious difference. Here I think this is the before and this is the after. This is the before and this is the after. So something obviously is happening here. Something is obviously happening with your own experience of your own body. So why is this interesting? Apart from being extremely problematic, so you're already like, oh. Why is it that we should engage with this? Well, of course, as I said in the beginning, we're getting a lot of body-based interactions. We're getting a lot of mobile interactions that are very close to our body, and we're getting all that, Internet of Things stuff. And we're getting also a more sort of awareness around gender-sensitive design, and even how these technologies transform our understanding of our own bodies. So I think, at least for me, this has been a super, super interesting alternative way of approaching design. And the problems, apart from the role of the user studies and trying to figure out whether this is working at all, is how on earth do you do this kind of design process? And the only way we figured out is to use yourself a lot in the design process, to actually test everything. So we've been doing these exercises once a week for a whole year, together, 1 hour every week, doing Feldenkrais, laying on our carpets, working with ourselves, trying to improve our own somatic awareness and so on, which is of course a problematic and very subjective way of doing studies. Externalizing body experiences, how can you talk about them? How can you create meaning? How can you even discuss what this is when it's so deeply subjective and physical? So, somatic training and somatic perception and how we can improve ourselves as designers and as researchers, I think, is one of the things I learned the most from this project. So I have one more example, but I can see I should probably finish. So this is an art project, and we'll just skip that. It's super, super interesting, but we'll skip it. And just end with one quote again from Schusterman. Because one of the things that a lot of people will say is, well, your body's there for you. Why on earth are you putting technology into the equation anyway? What's the point with putting technology here? Well, first of all, we are already putting technology into the equation, so we have to do this. But secondly, I think his view here is interesting. He says that it doesn't matter what you do because nothing nothing will negate the body's centrality as the focus of affective perceptual experience through which we experience and engage in the world. And if technology can be like a prosthesis to help us overcome some of the distraction and stress caused by all of the technology we're entering, then that's good. And I think that is a very pragmatic and nice way of looking upon technology and somaesthetic design. So, now, I know some of you have to leave, so the exercise I want to do, I'll wait with until you've asked your questions, and then those who are interested can stay. It's an exercise that takes a little bit of time, so if you want to, you're welcome to stay, but for now I'll take questions.
Okay.